What's up, Kevin?
Hey, Wilfred.
Hey, so I wanted to ask you a few questions about funding because I think a lot of people are confused about how exactly it works.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I'm an average Columbia College student. I pay my tuition, my student life fee. Where does that student life fee go, and how does it get distributed, allocated?
Okay, all right. So generally speaking, every student pays $651 of student life fees. A lot of that money gets distributed throughout the Columbia University. So some of it will go to Learner Hall, which pays for your access to Learner, and then some of it will go to the athletics department for your basic gym membership, and then some of it will also come to CCSC. Specifically, $105 out of your $651 that you pay to Columbia University comes to CCSC.
Okay, and then what does CCSC do with it?
Okay, so essentially CCSC, the first thing that CCSC does is at the end of the previous school year, it comes together with the other three councils, SGA, which is the Student Council of Barnard College, GSSC for General Studies, and then ESD for Cs. So these four councils come together and essentially decide how we want to allocate money to 5 of the different governing boards that exist at Columbia. So the governing boards exist basically to manage all the student groups on campus, and then in the May that precedes the academic year, the presidents and treasurers of those councils come together to decide how much money that they want to allocate to the governing boards, which this year CCSC allocated approximately 62% of its total income to the governing boards.
Okay, and then where did the rest of it go?
Okay, so the rest of it, there are a few places that it goes. One major expense is the Facilities and Securities Fund, which this year was accounted for about 13% of CCSC's budget. So the Facilities and Securities Fund is essentially a front-end payment to Learner Hall for a lot of student event occurrences. And this fund was established when the councils and the governing boards realized that there was a huge variability in terms of sort of tech and facilities costs. So they decided to take this out of the student group's allocation money because it wouldn't really make sense to sort of have to adjust those numbers on an annual basis.
Okay.
So now the Facilities and Securities Fund exists as a front-end payment by the councils, which it is a pot of money that can be sort of accessed by any student group that meets the criteria listed in the sort of associated document.
Okay, that makes sense. What about this slice of pie that just goes back to the internal council budgets?
Okay, so the council budgets are decided by an allocation process that first goes through the council CCSC funding committee, and then it's reviewed by the CCSC funding committee. So each class council and the campus life committee creates their own budget and creates an application, and then they submit that allocation request to the funding committee, which then votes upon how much allocation to give them.
Okay, and what's the point of internal council budget? Why does the council need its own budget?
Essentially, a lot of the internal budget is for the class councils. It's basically for the class councils and the campus life committee. It's for event planning for their constituencies. So for the class councils, it's for their specific class. So this can include a class event, like for example, the class of 2013 this week is having a party in Learner Party Space. So that's for the entire junior class. So that's an example of an event that a class council might use CCSC funds for.
Okay.
And Campus Life Committee essentially does the same thing, except their targeted constituency is the entire Columbia College student body.
And so that whole internal council budget is about 8%, 7 to 8% of the entire pie.
Yeah, which is actually, all things considered, is not that significant of a percentage of the budget. Okay,
then what about this $79,000 here that's just undecided? What is that all about?
Okay, so essentially, the way that a lot of these funding decisions are made is a lot of them happen sort of in isolation. Like, for example, this Facilities and Securities Fund, that is sort of decided based on historical figures from the previous year and sort of a projection of a 5% increase. So, and then also the amount that we allocate to the governing boards is decided at the FACU meeting, which happens in the spring preceding the academic year.
So FACU is when all the councils come together and...
Yeah, FACU is when all the councils come together and decide how much money they want to allocate to the governing boards. And then, for example, the internal allocations, that happens at the beginning of the fall semester. So all of these funding decisions sort of like happen at different times. So it's never really ever the case that, CCSC is sitting down and trying to sort of decide how to sort of cut up the pie. It's these sort of expenses just sort of roll in. And essentially what the extra money is going to be used for, first of all, there's going to be co-sponsorships coming in. So sort of student groups who have unexpected costs or sort of extenuating circumstances or who have like great ideas for new events are more than welcome to come to apply to the councils for funding for that. But then also beyond that, $79,000 is a little bit more than standard, and it's a little bit more than sort of what we expect based on historical figures for what is going to come in to our co-sponsorship application pool. So it's sort of left to the council to decide how to best then redistribute that money.
Okay. And then there's also concern over the $101,000 surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So could you comment on that and just kind of explain why it's that number?
Yeah. So a surplus for CCSC is pretty standard. Although $101,000 is a bit higher than usual. The surplus sort of needs to be in place because the CCSC doesn't receive the funds from the registrar's office until like a month or so into the semester. So it's important that CCSC and its sort of constituent groups all have access to funds right away, starting from the beginning of the year. However, as I said, like $101,000 is a little bit more than usual. So it may be, one thing that the council may consider doing is, deciding to cut down on the surplus. So spend a little bit more of that money this year.
Cool. Any other comments about, the funding process or anything that ordinary Columbia College students should know?
Well, not particularly, but we are here, like, along with the other governing boards, like, we as the councils here we really do see our mission as, like, promoting student life at Columbia. And just know that, when we plan events and when we spend the money, we may not be 100% efficient at it all the time, but at the end of the day, the goal is definitely still to plan events for the Columbia College constituency.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Wilfred.